The chair is here, the flowers are here, the water is awaiting. So please give a warm welcome to Maura Sills.
It's a lot brighter here than I would have thought. Lots of light coming this way, which perhaps suggests that I need it more than you do. I first want to acknowledge that I'm in a kind of a sandwich of two incredibly vibrant presenters. The last one who's, I'm not going to use the word testosterone, and I had a conversation with the next presenter who feels so full of energy also. So I feel in a kind of a sandwich, which isn't a bad thing. I wonder, just to help me settle, and maybe it will help you settle, is if you'd be willing just to take 2-3 breaths in a minute, with the possibility that you are just experiencing breathing without past or future. So if you're willing just to sit and maybe wiggle a bit forward in your chair, so as your back's straight, and just for a minute, just before I start to talk, see if there's a possibility, whether your eyes are open or closed, feet on the floor, your bottom on the chair, of even for one breath in and one breath out, the possibility of no thoughts, just that breath. Thank you. If you didn't succeed, try, and try again. So, my name is Maura Sills, and I come from England, where we have a training institute for psychotherapists. We've been around for about 35, 40 years. And the institute is called the Karuna Institute. It's based in a park, national park, a wilderness area in Britain. And when the students come to learn, they are residential for the learning modules. The group that we teach stays together for this process of learning for 2 to 3 years. And we are in this wilderness area, which I feel we're so privileged to have this opportunity to develop practitioners who have got the opportunity to come into relationship with the rawness, the wildness of nature. I think maybe some of you have understandings of psychotherapy that are more traditional and perhaps more analytic. I think, just like all of the presenters here this couple of days have communicated, that we need a different response in all different aspects of our life. Mostly there's been discussion around about work life and ethical practice and what would benefit other people and oneself at the same time. But I think we need to look at radical opportunities in all of our jobs, in all of our lives. From psychologists, business people, entrepreneurs, psychotherapists, hairdressers, engineers. It goes on and on and on. That to meet the conditions of our times, in my opinion, takes a real act of courage and bravery. To understand how conditioned we are and the ways in which we are conditioned, I think really takes a lot of dedication, determination, and dare I say it, discipline. Discipline to keep being open to how am I? What is this? Who is this person that is responding in this moment? This is, our training is based very much on Buddhist practice. I do not see Buddhism as a religion. If it was, I don't think I would be able to be part of it because of many aspects of hierarchy that seem to flow through many of our religions. What Buddhism has discovered, what the individual discovers, is the same as any individual in any religion, in no religion, when they start to determine to pay attention to how things are inside. And a lot of our work and the talks so far, not all of them, have been to do with what we can do, yes? And I think that's essential. A teacher of mine used to say, think global, act local. I think you probably know that expression. So when we look as psychotherapists to what needs to be attended to, it's not the old way of looking at it, which is to attend to how our individual family conditions have affected how we are in the world. It includes that, but it's more of a kind of a mandala, and one way of kind of thinking about it is that it's our relationship to different aspects of our embodied life that are out of kilter. And so we have this little mandala, and so obviously our relationship to self, which is usually what's understood in terms of psychotherapy, but also our relationship to other, our relationship to the planet, to the earth, and our relationship to whatever you or I might understand by the word sacred, spiritual, meaning, why am I here kind of questions, the bigger questions. And if we don't pay attention to all of those aspects of our opportunities as human beings, we will get out of kilter. We will become unwell. And so the issues that have come into the room in terms of what's the agreed norm that we all seem to get sucked into in terms of profit, in terms of this, in terms of that. We need to, as many people have said, understand that the question is to ourselves. In Buddhist practice, the Buddha said, don't believe anything. Don't believe anything. It was a very radical teaching until it is your truth. Until it is your truth. And there have been so many inspirational speakers, and it's so tempting to take on their way, my way, as opposed to finding your way. And I want to talk briefly. The talk was entitled The Challenge of Belonging. And I want to talk about things that are less kind of pleasant, if you like, in terms of, well, how come? And these questions are asked by really learned people. About 10 years ago, there was a big meeting of all the high lamas and high teachers in Buddhism, especially in Tibetan Buddhism. And the question was, well, why are they not becoming happier, these Westerners? Yeah? We offer the teachings. Why are they not happy? And there was great debates about this. And I think we need to understand that the teachings that are on offer to help this journey of opening, knowing, is not about cognition. And so no matter how many ideas we have that are inspirational, it's the inspiration that's important and not the idea. You know, the idea may be useful, may not be useful, but it's that which lifts us up to feel that sense of possibility, and then finding how that possibility translates for me, in my life, in my way. One of the things that came out of the question, why are these Westerners not happy? You know, they come on retreat after retreat, you know, just pain, 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 you know. Even the longer retreats felt more pain, more pain. More. I remember my own teacher, who was from Burma, you know, he had interviews with us as we were practicing, and I went into one interview, and how was it going, sort of question. And I said, oh, it's just so hard. He says, what are you doing? And I said, well, I sit for an hour and I walk for 20 minutes. And he just laughed. And because he wasn't Western, yes? He said, with all the trouble and sufferings of your Western mind, why add to them? He suggested, walk for an hour and sit for 5 minutes, yes? It did help. So it's what is it inside our Western psyche that maybe is creating an obstacle to really benefiting from these lovely teachings that we've had today, from becoming more deeply ethical, yes, to be in touch with our wisdom, to be in touch with our kindness and generosity. My suggestion is that the Western conditions in themselves and the conditioning factors have left most of us with an inner sense of low self-esteem and lack of self-worth. How can that be? We're all so successful. How can that be? No matter if we had a wonderful mother, wonderful family, lots of money, there seems to be a real malaise, a real illness in our capacity to be in relationship with our inner experience, with other people, with the planet, with whatever we consider sacred. And this non-cognitive capacity to inquire sometimes gets really misunderstood, because quite often it gets talked about just like, oh, that's just feelings or intuition or, yes, yes. But my suggestion is this deeper intelligence, which some people call awareness, some people call awakening, some people call wisdom. I'd like to just call it knowing, this deeper capacity to know, to be in touch with what's happening, what has happening, what might happen. This deeper knowing, this knowing of the individual, which I believe is intrinsic and inherent in all of us, has become obscured and constricted. I also feel, through no fault of our own nor our parents, that the relational developmental context from very, very early on, from in the womb, has been deeply challenged. You know, nowadays, I don't know how it's in Sweden, but in the West, I've noticed that pregnancy is something that's either a medical condition or we just ignore it, and life as usual, business as usual. Baby comes out, 6 months off, back to work. I don't know if you do it better than that. There's something that's not being understood, which is the loving start of the individual in the womb and beyond is without measure the most important capacity, the most important contributing factor to our wellness, well-being, generosity, interrelatedness, and so forth and so on. That this quality of, we call it our being nature, if you like, this quality of our being nature needs to be fed. And in the womb and in little ones, it's just the same as in grown-ups, it seems to be. That there are qualities and conditions for an inner sense of that growth of the strength of our knowing and our wisdom, which is precognitive, not cognitive. And a sense inside ourselves that we are intrinsically well, we're intrinsically good, we're intrinsically human, and that goodness allows us, that feeling of goodness, allows us to participate in a bigger collective with other people and on the planet. These qualities, some of you obviously know them, but they include acceptance, they include recognition and acknowledgement, warmth, attunement, and responsiveness. So if we have those qualities and we recover from the difficult inner conditions and weather, it seems like we get through life quite well and we become usually useful and helpful individuals within our society. If we are not in touch with our own sense of inner goodness, then everything else is disadvantaged. We start to self-hold, hold ourselves together as opposed to trusting, the universe. We tend to hold back, we restrict our availability, we develop this energetic, cellular, mental system that holds us together because there's not been enough recognition, warmth, so forth and so on. We haven't felt safe and held enough for long enough in order to stand on our own 2 feet. This can quite often, here we go back into the psychological, the psychodynamic. But I offer you 2 challenges that I think in the West, most of us experience at some level. One is the challenge that comes from our personal history, our early experience of being in this lifetime on the planet. But actually even before that begins at the point of conception, and I don't want to go into all of that. But at that point, that very beginning, when whatever way we describe it, before we were not, and afterwards we are. Yes? It's like the point in time when egg and sperm and potentially consciousness come together, and this new being starts its journey. And I'm going to talk about briefly, there are 2 kinds of loneliness and separation. They both lead to difficulties in our personal lives, being human beings, this planet, being responsive to the conditions. There's not only 2, but we could just have to limit what I'm trying to describe. But one is that maybe that embodiment process in and of itself was the beginning of a distancing from that knowing, what was just perhaps described as awareness, yes? No, it wasn't consciousness, yes? From that wisdom and knowing in ourselves, the awakening quality, which is natural and available in all of us. My belief is so. So maybe even just becoming a human being, the journey into embodiment itself, is the first movement away from something that is experienced personally, but maybe is not personal. Maybe what we're experiencing is a bit like taking a drinking cup and dipping it into a huge lake and having a drink of it, yes? There's a lot of water there to be drunk by a lot of people. That maybe awareness is not personal at its base. Maybe awareness is something that we can participate in, as opposed to this awareness or my awareness. So that kind of separation from that sense of a different kind of home that is more about the ocean and less about the individual. And there are terms to describe it. So sometimes it's called just longing, spiritual homesickness. Yeah. The Buddha talked about one of the factors that shakes us up into to pay attention, is a feeling of dissatisfactoriness. I don't know about you. About 40, 50 years ago, I went off and I went to a psychotherapist. And I went in, and she said, "Why are you here?" I said, "Well, there's just something that's not quite right. A few sessions should sort me out." Yeah. And here I am, still not sorted out. But I am suggesting that this disturbance in us, this kind of unsatisfactoriness, despite whatever we have and however our lives are going, the fear, the confusion, the silence, the emptiness, that these are conditions, these are qualities of mind to embrace in order for us to flow out into our mutuality once more. So I'm suggesting be disturbed. There's a lot in this world to be disturbed by. Feel uncertain and don't try and get rid of the uncertainty. This is the wisdom. This is the possible exploration, inquiry. Pay attention to the inner weather. Much has been said about that from other speakers. The route to reconnection is not to go towards what's good and easy, my suggestion is, but is to come back to what's unfinished, disowned, incomplete. Sometimes we call it the orphans of consciousness. Things that we haven't been able to really stay present for in our whole developmental history. Sometimes we call these the wounds of being. So ontic obscuration, the obscuration, the covering up of our deepest existential nature. And so this kind of wounds of spirit, whatever we want to call them, this constricted consciousness, this constricted knowing. I'm trying not to use any Buddhist words, but citta. Constriction of our knowing is something we need to reclaim in order to begin to be able to make choices. Begin to be able to make choices. Not from a place of only, it's a good idea, but it's impossible when I go to sleep at night not to know that what happened was not a good thing for me, or how I behaved, or whatever. So to return to that self-regulation of knowing what's helpful, what's wise, what's skillful, what reconnects us to that quality of wisdom that's ubiquitous, inherent in all human beings. Once we start to realign with that as an experience in ourselves, we then start to realign our relationships with each other very differently. So no matter if I'm the teacher and she's the student, at some place, at one of the most important places, we are absolutely equal and limitless. Yes? It's, but to be there, to connect with that place, means, for most of us, some pretty difficult places to be with and to resource ourselves in order to be with those places. It means our relationships, whether we're in a hierarchy or whatever, are non-hierarchical in this place. So it gives us a place to meet each other, being to being. We talk about that recognition as something like, it's almost like the universal holding field, which helps us start to connect to the nature and qualities of mind, of awakened mind, which are naturally ethical, which are naturally interconnected, which I was saying outside, this is not altruism. This is not doing this for the benefit of others. We start to find that if we don't respond, attune and respond congruently and in an attuned manner to each other, those it hurts us. It's quite a selfish, actually, practice, to be honest. If we don't do it, I don't know what problems you'll have if I behave badly towards you tonight. You might have none. I know what I'm going to feel, yes? And so this ethical reattunement, for me, is the start to return to resensitize to our human nature. The other is much more personal and developmental and says a lot about living in the West today. And who was it? Was it Hillman? Said something like, I won't say it's a very nasty thing. I won't put that into the psyche. But to suggest that we're not contaminating the rest of the planet through our Western psyche is, I think, incorrect. I think the pollutant of our Western minds spills over to nearly every place on the planet. I shall be very brief. The other aspect I really want to talk about is something that I said earlier, which is about this personal, when we do not feel received and seen and loved and responded to enough, don't know what enough is, in our family of origin, in our mum's tum. It can even happen so early on in our mother's tummy that we start to get messages through the umbilical cord, the kind of messages of maybe toxicity or not enough, or, the little one apparently knows that they are separate from the very beginning, but where they don't know separateness in the womb is in feelings. Feelings. So if mum's feeling depressed, baby feels depressed. If mum's feeling frightened, baby feels frightened. If mum's feeling kind and loving, baby feels blissed out and falls back asleep again. It just keeps feeding and getting bigger, blissed out, So we start to get feedback that starts to limit the possibilities of our responsiveness. Oh gosh, I'd like to say so much more, but I'm going to stop in a minute. What can we do to help? The first thing is in our interactions with everybody, whether it's an important person or an unimportant person. See majesty. See majesty, see brilliance, see the same that awakens in you, awakening in them. See heartfulness. The mind within the Buddhist tradition is quite often referred to as the heart as opposed to the brain, but I think it's the whole body. So we start to look towards others and realize that there's a possibility of connection in those places. It only takes a few people to actually see you. And by see you, I mean to connect, excuse me, heart to heart, or being to being, or sacred to sacred. But to really see you, not just to kind of bliss out and everyone's beautiful and everyone's sacred, but to actually attune to you as the other being. It just takes a few people in order to shift those old messages and to start to feel a sense of belonging again, possibility of belonging, of being part of this planet, of being able to reconnect with that which offers relational possibility. Person who saved my being was my primary school teacher, Miss MacDonald, who's probably long dead. Although I've got to be careful because I do kill people off in my mind because I think they're so old that they must be dead, so forgive me. But I think I'm sick, yeah. And Miss MacDonald, my family was, people have shared lots of families, not happy and quite violent and unpredictable. And so I got to primary school very not knowing, having very little sense of belonging, feeling very much on my own, very separate. And Miss MacDonald saw me, or saw something in me that I saw that she saw. And that in itself was the beginning of a shift from being on my own to, my goodness, and you see that you're seeing that just now, thank you, to the possibility of belonging. And I've been so fortunate. There have been different people throughout my life who I feel have recognized this inner part of myself and who have strengthened that sense of spiritual family. Only takes a few to reverse the conditions of, the lack of love. And I'll finish with, and then there's a few minutes to see if anybody would like to respond and to share. But I'll finish with something from the Buddha's teaching. Two things. One is that the beginning of freedom is to feel the difficulty and the suffering. Yeah? There's no bypassing that. So the beginning is to really know how difficult things might be before moving forward. In Buddhism, sometimes when people become monks or nuns or even lay people, they take something called the refuges, the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And you can think about it as this historical Buddha, the Dhamma as the Buddha's teachings, and the Sangha as the community of monks and nuns. My particular way of liking it, because I'm not a nun, I'm a secular person, and this was, I think, Thich Nhat Hanh again. He translates things in lots of different ways, but to take refuge in the Buddha is to take refuge in our awakened potential. It's not, Buddha doesn't just have it. It's all here. To take refuge in the Dhamma is to be courageous. Know your own truth. Really, and if you get it wrong, you can live with that, yeah? And the Sangha is the community of like-minded people that are here. So Thich Nhat Hanh says, to awaken to the truth together, yeah? The Buddha suggested that of those 3 refuges, the one that you cannot do without in this lifetime is spiritual friendship, so community, sangha, where the collective wisdom can show up. So I'm so glad to have been here. I'm out of my comfort zone in this conference, which is always good. If it was all the time, it wouldn't be so good. But it's, 2 days is probably about it. I'll go and recover when I go home. But for you all to be here, to come together, to be willing, that's almost 90% of the journey. So thank you very much. And